Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino. It won't be long before there's snow flying here in Niagara Falls, Ontario. It's October 27th, I think, today. It's a little chilly. It's about 10 degrees at best. But I want to get out and get another ride in on my DR650. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is there's not going to be too many nice enough days to get out and actually ride my bike before it starts to really close in on us. But more importantly, my DR650 is sitting about 90 kilometers away from turning 50,000 kilometers on the odometer. And that's a big milestone for me. So today I thought I'll take the bike out for a ride, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about what it's like to own a motorcycle with 50,000 K on it, and whether I would buy another high mileage DR650 or whether I would buy a new one if I was to do it over again. So maybe I'll get the bike out of the trailer here, then I'll go in and we can talk a little bit about it, and I'll show you some footage from the ride once I get the ride done. Okay, why don't you sit back, grab yourself something warm to drink, enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. It's gonna be a nice day today. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, we got the bike out of the trailer. Why don't I grab a coffee, we'll go inside the shed, and I'll give you my thoughts on buying a high mileage DR650 and whether I would do that again, look for a lower kilometer mileage bike, or maybe buy a brand new one. Okay, let's go. Maybe a good place to start is answering why I bought a DR650 with over 41,000 kilometers on the clock in the first place. Probably the main reason is cost. I paid $3,100 Canadian for this bike 2 years ago, when the cost of a new DR650 was around 7,800 Canadian, plus PDI, all the taxes, all that kind of stuff. So cost did play a factor in my decision. The other thing is I wanted more of a project motorcycle at the time than necessarily a daily driver. I wanted something that I could fuss around with and tinker on and get to know the systems on the bike. I had full intentions of taking the top end off the motor with that many kilometers on it, to inspect the valves and the cam, and of course the pistons and the cylinder itself. I took my time and shopped around until I found one that looked to be in very good condition. And in fact, the one I bought was. It had been owned by 3 other people, and it had been maintained very, very well. In fact, the gentleman that I bought it off, the third owner, well, he actually had it in an aircraft hangar with about 6 other motorcycles, all of which were just impeccably clean. When you buy an older motorcycle like this, whether it's a DR650 or any other bike, you need to understand that mileage is different depending on the type of bike and what the bike's used for. And what I mean by that, if you buy a long haul cruiser or a Goldwing, or even like a simple cruising V-twin, they tend not to be ridden super aggressively. And in the case of something like a Goldwing, they're built for lots and lots of mileage. So 40,000 K on one of those bikes is absolutely nothing to worry about. In fact, they're just being broken in probably. If you buy something like a motocross bike, a 2-stroke motocross, even the new high performance 4-stroke motocross bikes, well, they require much more service. And in the case of the 2-strokes, you're often doing top ends on those, doing rings and pistons, because they don't last forever. The DR650 is a really understressed platform. It doesn't produce a lot of horsepower. It doesn't rev very high. has a nickel coated cylinder, which means it should last thousands and thousands of kilometers. And so I was pretty comfortable looking at a bike with 40,000 plus kilometers on it. And in the end, I did buy one. This video really isn't about how to buy a used motorcycle. There's lots of videos out there on that, and in fact, I even have one myself that I'll leave a link to down in the description. But when you do buy a high mileage motorcycle, there's usually some things you need to look for. Specifically with the DR650, there's about 6 or 7 different things that could potentially go wrong with motorcycles that are over 30 or 40,000 kilometers. The best place to do your research on this is one of the DR650 specific forums. Now, I really like DR Riders, and I frequent that site as I lurk around in the shadows and read all of the great information that people have on there. What you'll find with the DR650 is there are potentials with the third gear failing, the neutral sending unit coming loose. There's a few things like that with the DR650 that you need to keep an eye on. So when you buy a higher mileage bike like this, you should be asking a few questions like, has the output seal shaft retainer been installed on this bike, because I see it's older than such and such. Those are the kinds of questions that can help you buy an older machine like this, and more importantly, feel confident when you do. Now, I took this bike out for a ride before I bought it, listening for gear whine, excessive valve clearance that's ticking away in there, and it passed all those tests really good. It did have the typical DR650 rooster starter sound, and I think the guy was a little bit worried that it would turn me off, but I already knew about it, and I told him, look, hey, it's normal. I know about that. Easy fix, no problems. So when I brought the bike home, I was really confident in both the maintenance and the type of riding that the past owners did. I knew that the first owner basically bought it as an adventure bike, and he rode it out to Alaska twice, from my understanding. He sold that, and a young lady in Guelph, Ontario rode it around as a commuter bike. And then the gentleman that I bought it off of used it just for gravel roads and fire road trails. He wasn't doing any kind of excessive enduro crap with it. So I was really confident. I purchased it and I brought it home here to the Tinker Shed. Once again, part of the reason that I bought the DR650 was so that I could putz around on it a little bit and tinker on it. When I bought mine, I bought it in the fall, late November actually, with a little bit of snow on the ground. And I took it in, checked it over, and then I really, really wanted to take the cylinder head off. I'd never done that before on a 4-stroke motorcycle like this, with a 4-valve head and all the overhead cam and everything. So it was more of an interest thing for me to see how much wear was actually on that bike's internal components. What I found really was pleasantly surprising. The DR650 does use a nickel coated cylinder, meaning you never have to hone it. And it's a super hard, very thin, almost looks like chrome on the inside of that cylinder. And I could still see the honing marks from the factory on that cylinder. Now I measured the internal bore and everything seemed to be right in spec. I also measured the gap on all of the ring pistons and they were actually within spec, which was really, really good. I took out all of the valves and measured the valve stem thickness, and those were within spec as well. I did notice when I bought it, there was a little bit of smoke at startup, white smoke. Now, being November and probably having some condensation in the system, I figured that was probably what it was. But while I had the cylinder head apart, I replaced all of the valve seals and I put new valve springs in the bike as well, even though the original springs were well within spec. I tightened everything back up, put it all back together, and the bike ran perfectly. I actually found it started a little bit better, and I attribute this to just the fact that when I put it back together, I set the valves to what the factory was because they were a little bit tight when I bought the bike. It probably just hadn't had its proper tune-up for that season. So this really does give me a lot of confidence in the longevity of the engine on the DR650. I know on the internet and all the forums, everybody goes on about how durable it is, but it really was nice to see that this engine is so under stress that even at 40,000 plus kilometers, the engine looked pretty much like new inside. Now I really lucked out with mine. I found a really good bike, but even before I bought it, I had planned on doing quite a bit of work, and I did actually follow through with all of it. I did plan on draining and flushing all the brake systems and putting new pads on. I put a new battery in the motorcycle. I checked the top end like I talked about, and then ensured that the tires and the suspension were in good shape. Now, the suspension itself worked really good when I bought it, but earlier in the spring of this year, the front fork seals did let go. I do view this as kind of a maintenance item. They're easy to fix, but it's certainly something you need to understand that the older the motorcycle is, the more wear and tear you're going to get on all of those internal components. And I still have a little bit of work that I want to do on those front forks before too long, that being all the guide bushings inside of them. So just consider that when you do purchase an older, higher mileage bike like this, that you're probably going to want to do this type of work regardless of what it looks like when you buy it. There is something to be said about a bike that has a lot of miles on it and that has been well maintained. The opposite end of that is what I would call the garage queen. So this is the DR650 that you find in someone's garage that's 25 years old and it has 2,500 or 3,000 kilometers on the odometer. Now, if that bike is really only moving that much, like a 10 kilometers a year or 100 kilometers a year, the chances are they haven't really done all the services. So they've never changed the brake fluid. So the brake fluid probably has moisture in it, which could impact the internal components of that system. The oil's probably old, it's probably got a lot of acids build up in it, and because it's not circulating, internal components could be exposed to more air than they're designed to be, and rust could happen inside your engine. Now, the worst thing that I always find is they never ever stabilize the gas, or they never drain the gas out of these things. So your injection system, your carburation system can be fouled up, and all the vacuum tubes in that lead in there could be cracked. I guess what I'm saying is there is an argument that a well-maintained motorcycle with high mileage may give you less issues than a low mileage motorcycle that just doesn't really get much maintenance at all or any kind of riding. It's something to think about. People like myself tend to like and enjoy doing all the maintenance on the bike, and the riding keeps all the systems lubricated and moving the way they should. So higher mileage bikes shouldn't be something that scares you away, but you just need to do your homework before you buy one. Interestingly enough, while I was making this video, I got a comment on my first video, the DR650 history, from Him Shapirian on YouTube. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And their question or comment really was the fact that with the cost of power sports today, used power sports, is it really worth spending $4,000 or $5,000 on a used DR when a new one is only around $7,500 to $7,800 Canadian? And they make a really, really valid point here. Especially if you are not the handiest person and you don't want to be wrenching on something like this. If you're going to spend $5,000 plus on a used DR650 where you really don't know the history of it, a new DR650 might be the best choice for you. But only you can really answer whether that cost and risk factor is really something that concerns you. But it is a very good point, and I wanted to mention it. They did bring that up, and it makes a lot of sense to me. For me, 2 years ago, the price of power sports were low enough that I felt the value and the risk really made a lot of sense to me. And that's why I bought this bike. It runs and drives exactly the way a new bike would. I don't notice any difference between mine and Carl's, who has half the kilometers on it that mine does. And once I rode it for a while, my confidence level in the bike basically was just as good as if it was new. And this year we're doing multi-day, 5-6 day trips all over Ontario without any concerns for reliability with the bike that wouldn't be there if it was brand new. The only issue that we really had this year was Carl's choke cable actually rusted a little bit. But that could happen to a brand new bike if it stored the same conditions that Carl's bike went through. So I think personally it was a good purchase. This, I guess, leads me to the final question, and that is, if I was going to do it again, would I buy a used DR650 with high miles or low miles, or would I just buy a brand new DR650? Well, It's a hard question to answer. And the answer really isn't the same for me as it might be for you. Most likely, I would look for a good quality used DR650, but that's just me because I do like to fuss around on them. I would look for the lowest kilometers per cost ratio that I could find. I'd probably look for one around 20,000 K is probably where I would start my search, but I'd want to pay under $5,000 for it. If I could find that happy mix of a really well-maintained bike with lower kilometers and the right price, that's the route I would go. To buy a new one for me doesn't make a lot of sense because I have the shed and I have all the tools and I have friends, Carl being a big component to that can help me fix that bike no matter what's wrong. And because the DR is such a simple platform, there's not really too much that can go wrong that I couldn't fix in this shop by myself. The only thing that would sort of scare me is if I had a catastrophic transmission failure or the top end blew out of it, which I highly doubt that's going to happen. Other than that, I can pretty much do all the repairs right here in this shop. It's somewhat dissimilar to something, say, like a Goldwing, where there's a lot that can go wrong with those things that an older machine, all those technical systems, air ride, all that could be a little bit more than I want to deal with. But that's basically my opinion. That's not necessarily what's right for you. What a great thing turn. It's like halfway through its life. Well, it's too nice of a day to be sitting in here and jabbing my jaw all day. So I'm going to get out there and do some riding so that I can get some B-roll to fill into the video and make it a little more interesting than just me talking. If you did enjoy today's video, please consider leaving a comment down below. And what I'd really like to see is if you have a DR650, why don't you put how many kilometers are on your motorcycle? I'd be really interested to know how many people have more than 50,000 K on their bike, and be really interested to know what the highest kilometers are from the people that have watched the video. So think about that, and if you wouldn't mind, leave the comment down below. Now, if you really do enjoy the channel, I'd ask you that maybe you like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me to understand exactly what people are looking for, and it helps YouTube to determine other viewers that might like the content as well. So you'd be helping them out and introducing them to the channel. Until then, again, I'm going to get back out on the road. The day is just beautiful. But I hope to see you soon here again on Dino's Tinker Shed. Bye for now, and I hope to see you soon.